I started writing BUMWIPER before I was hurt. I started writing it while I was still working in the disability profession, and I was working at a fairly high level. I was about to become a network manager. I was a behavior modification expert. Um, my skills were highly sought after. Um, and for all intents and purposes, this was going to be my life, working with people with disabilities. Then I got hurt, attacked in the workplace by a guy with a knife. And 20 years or 18 years of violent assaults, the psychiatrist said that this was the straw that broke the camel's back. So when I look at my book, BUMWIPER, I see it very differently than I did when I first wrote it. But anyways, let's dive in. Let's do chapter 4. We'll see how it goes. Welcome to Mark My Words. Mark My Words is the story of my journey from a place where I was shattered to where I could live again. Alrighty, BUMWIPER, Chapter 4, Respite. On the job, the clients could be difficult and hard to deal with, but sometimes, well, actually surprisingly often, the parents could be even worse. Now, if you're a parent with a child in care reading this, bear in mind that not all parents are horrors. Some are very impressive people. The good ones have not stolen most of their child's pension money over the years and then cried that their child has no money to buy clothes. Many have always bought their child's clothes from the op shop and then complain when we spend $20 at Kmart for a pair of shoes. Strangely, there were even parents out there who didn't treat us like the enemy, who didn't seek to abuse and deride us. I know that you, the reader, are not like that. I'm very sure that you're one of the good ones. For many of the parents, nothing that the staff who look after their child did was ever good enough, ever. We may have taught a 20-year-old to tie his own shoes for the first time in his life, but the parent will complain that we didn't teach him the right way or the way that they were taught to do it. And believe me, there are people out there who think that there is a right and wrong way to tie up a shoe. If you're one of them, get over yourself and move on. There's infinitely more important things in life to worry about. We may have taught a person to cook a full-baked dinner, giving the client a sense of independence and self-worth, and the parent will be upset that the gravy was lumpy. We once taught a young man over 8 months to wake himself up in the morning, shower, dress, eat breakfast, brush his teeth, and pack his bag for his day at work completely independently. A family member was angry at us because we were unable to teach him to use mouthwash. The client thought it was a drink, and there was no way we could dissuade him from this thinking. Some people just really enjoy the taste of mouthwash. And when I say that the family member was angry, I mean angry. Not just concerned or worried, but swearing, abusive, screaming, horribly upset. This family member saw our success as an indictment of their parenting skills. It didn't matter that we'd been trained for this work, unlike a new parent. And also, unlike a parent, we were only with the client for a few hours a day. At the end of the shift, we went home and forgot about them. All parents are too tired to put in the hours of concentrated effort because they don't get a break. Also, we were part of a small team of 6 to 8 carers who all got to sleep all night long and then begin fresh for the next shift. There was never an intention to slight a parent with our work. This parent particularly was unable to enjoy the accomplishment of their moderately disabled son that 8 months previously couldn't even dress himself, and now who could independently complete his entire morning routine. Not to mention that his new independence freed all of us, including the family where he stays when he stays at their house, from heaps and heaps of hard work every morning. I am told that many families that have a disabled child suffer from a lot of guilt and shame over that child. Guilt that perhaps it was that glass of wine that mummy had in the first trimester that may have disabled their child, or perhaps they were too active during the pregnancy. The other emotion is shame. Shame that their genetic code was not strong or good enough to bring forth a healthy child. Shame that they couldn't look after that child properly and had to put him or her into full-time care. I tend to agree that these observations are accurate. I do not agree, however, that they should feel this way. The children of parents who have accepted their child's disability as an act of God or providence or just bad luck and have dealt with the fact that sometimes stuff happens are infinitely better adjusted. The disabled child of such people feels the unconditional love of their parents. Kids instinctively know when they are loved and not thought of as a burden to be endured. In my experience, in these cases, the children are calmer and have fewer behavior problems. But it is true that sometimes all the love in the world cannot help a disabled person, and that is entirely due to the nature of the disability. On the other hand, the children of parents who try to blame everyone for what happened to their baby, who are filled with anger and guilt, who have never dealt with their unresolved feelings, those are the children that usually have the greatest number of problems: violence, obsessions, frustrations, and negative behaviors. I quickly found this out on my second place of work. I was working in an idyllic beachside suburb, living with friends and outside of work, having a great time. I found myself working in a series of purely respite houses. As mentioned earlier, respite house is a house set up to house clients on a short-term basis. Clients can come and stay for as little as a couple of days to a maximum of a couple of weeks. I was in high demand at this time as I was male and strong, a huge asset when working with potentially violent clients. One of the houses I worked in had been blocked out. That means that the house was filled with permanent and semi-permanent clients who were so disruptive and violent that they could not live in their parents' homes. Also, the government department I worked for had run out of places to put such clients. So the time in respite care went from a few weeks to a few months, to the point that they were essentially living there permanently. The one distinct advantage of a respite house is that detailed records are kept of all client histories. As it is crucial that staff are prepared for the differing needs of the clients, the records are comprehensive, useful, and pertinent. It would certainly make life difficult to put a Down syndrome client who loves loud music in the same time as an autistic client who cannot stand loud noises. It was in these houses that I first gained some perspective on what the clients may be feeling. I had just had what I considered to be a great day with one of the clients. Due to a clerical snafu and a client cancelling her booking, I was left in the house with one very high-functioning client. We'd been to the beach for a swim, we had ridden the ferry, and we'd seen a film. For me, it was a top day. When we returned to the unit, the client asked if it would just be him and I the next day. I told him that no, there were 3 other clients coming in first thing in the morning and it wouldn't just be us. I left him and thought nothing more about it as I had reports to write. I was about to go home when I heard a loud banging coming from the client's room. I found him crying and banging his head against the wall, softly saying to himself, Why do I have to be here? He said this over and over, and it certainly left an impression. It was soon after this that I had my first heart-stopping moment. We had a client, a small boy with cerebral palsy. His body was virtually paralyzed and could only be bent after extensive massage. There was something about this kid, though, that was otherworldly. His body was contorted with the disease, but his face was perfect in every way. Small, but perfectly proportioned, with glittering eyes, and a smile that was simply angelic. It always felt good to spend time with him. I always came away from time with him somehow at peace. His parents were also the first truly great parents I'd ever met. Whenever they dropped him off, the mother always cried as she was going to miss her son. His sisters always kissed him and treated him as a favored sibling, not a burden. They had learned this from their parents, and all my colleagues were in agreement. This little boy was almost constantly in pain and suffered severely from epilepsy. Severe enough that the next seizure could kill him unless a Valium suppository was inserted into his rectum within 10 minutes of the beginning of the seizure. The first time I had to do this was when he'd had a seizure in the lounge room. My boss told me to pick him up and bring him to the bathroom. She met me there and asked me to hold him while she dispensed the suppository. After that, I was to continue holding him so we could check his vitals and be sure he was coming out of the seizure. I'd never seen anything inserted into anyone's backside, so I was completely unprepared for what happened next. I was about to ask my boss when I asked my boss if I should carry him to his bedroom when from this tiny little boy's bum came a poo the likes of which I'd never seen. Came out in one long piece and kept coming and coming and coming until it hit the floor, started to coil. When it was over, it looked like a giant brown poo snake, complete with a bit sticking up like a head, and it was left sitting on the floor guarding the room. I took a photo of that poo, but unfortunately that photo was lost long ago. I'm not sure how or why a Valium in the butt helped him, but the seizure always stopped immediately, and the little man then spent the next 2 to 3 days sleeping to get over it. My first experience of overseeing the procedure happened a couple of months later. We're at a park enjoying a carols in the park night with a few clients when he had another seizure. I checked the emergency pack and realized the suppository had not been packed. For a few moments, I stood trying to figure out what to do. The clock was ticking, and in 10 minutes, he would be dead. No question. I suddenly realized that we were a few minutes' drive from the local hospital. Looking around, I could not see any police officers, so I turned to my coworker and said I'd get him to the hospital. I picked him up out of his wheelchair and ran the 200 meters across the park to the van. Putting him across my lap so I could keep an eye on his vitals, I started the van and tore out of the parking lot. Even though it was 7 p.m., there was still a lot of traffic around, and I had to weave my way erratically in and out of traffic. It was barely a few minutes before a police car came screaming up behind me with his lights flashing. As I did not stop, he pulled alongside me and started to wave me to the side of the road. I literally held up the client, and thankfully the officer realized I was trying to get to the hospital. He pulled in front and started to clear a path to the emergency room. All this with me checking heart rate and pulse as often as I could while keeping a close eye on the car. Thankfully, I'd remembered to click start on my watch as soon as I'd seen him enter the seizure, so I knew exactly how much time I had. With 2.5 minutes to spare, I arrived at the emergency room, grabbed the client, flung open my door, and raced inside. I was well known in this emergency room, as was the client who received his medication and made a full recovery. It was only after he'd been taken to intensive care that I had finally sat down and worked through the enormity of what had just happened. It was at that moment that a police officer came striding purposefully towards me. Thankfully, he was on my side. He threw me the keys to the van that I had left running outside the emergency room. He had parked the car for me and had just come to make sure I was okay. I thanked him and began to get up as I had to get back to the rest of the staff and clients at the Christmas carols in the park. As I stood, though, my legs started to shake uncontrollably. I collapsed back on my chair and took a moment to breathe at the officer's suggestion. His parents entered and greeted me with tears of gratitude. I waved away their gratitude and thought no more of it. The moral of this chapter, if there is one, is that for parents who have a child who has a disability, it does not have to mean that it's the end of the world. And those whose job it is to help look after your child do not look down on you or judge you for your situation. Not just the carers, but the teachers, the doctors, the specialists, and everyone else that is paid to work with you and your child. We know that stuff happens. Sometimes people are born with disabilities. Generally, it's no one's fault, it's just life. Use those that are there to help you and your child to make your life better. Trust them. Allow them to do their job. Work with them. Don't hinder them. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by the results. We would like to see you as part of the team and not the enemy. The choice is yours. 15 years later, it's time for a reality check. Trauma occurs in a variety of ways. For me, trauma came from the families when they would abuse or berate me. I once had a client living in a beautiful apartment in northern Sydney. He and his flatmate had been given the unit on a short-term basis as there was no available community housing. The apartment was centrally located and had an incredible outlook. The clients were very lucky to be living there. After a few years, the men were found suitable government community housing, and it was a massive step down. The new unit, and I use new euphemistically, was further away, it was cheap, and it was shoddy, just like most community housing, especially when compared to their luxury apartment. I personally had lived in similar kind of places. The government came to our organisation to tell us that the clients needed to move. At their direction, we began the process of moving the clients. We discussed it with the parents who decided to check out the new digs. To put it lightly, the parents were not impressed. For you to understand this story fully, you must know that these people were very, very well off. They had inherited money and property and were determined to keep their wealth. They could easily afford to buy a similar luxury unit for their son. Easily. And I know this for a fact. But to do so would decrease their bank accounts full of their inherited nest egg. They, furious, came after me, calling me a bloody bastard and a stupid a-hole who was terrible at my job. I then had to work directly with their son as if nothing had happened because it was my job. I treated him just the same as I did any other day. I treated his family with the same respect as if nothing had happened. Now for a double reality check. I now find this impossible to understand. Why was I not offended by these parents? Why did I just take it without a murmur of protest? Why was I not angry? The truth is, I was livid. I was hurt and I felt betrayed. I had spent countless hours with their son. I had worked diligently to help him make his life better and succeeded. I had transitioned him from living in a group home, which he hated, to successfully living in the community. I had taught him self-care, how to cook, how to shop, how to use money, and to save for the big things that he wanted, and much, much more. And his parents shouted at me and called me a bloody bastard and a stupid asshole who was terrible at my job. This was causing trauma, and I had no idea. Whew, this is the end of chapter 4. I got to tell you, it is not easy to read this stuff. I wrote it. Yes. I've edited it. I've read through it. But reading it like this makes it real in a way that, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep doing this because the story gets worse. It's my book. I know what's coming. And it's like, I don't know if I can read this. Look, I'm gonna have to think about it. But anyway, look, I appreciate you checking out chapter 4 of BUMWIPER. I don't know if this is a book you can enjoy or if it's just a testament to somebody working in a career that not many people know much about. I don't know. Anyway, I appreciate you. Have a great week. I will talk to you again soon. Like, share, and subscribe, please, if you would, for me, as a favor. Good on you. Have a great week. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to Mark My Words. I'd like to thank my producer, Meredith Brosnan, and also Torian, Kevin, and Lorraine. And I can't forget the band Adelaide, who allows us to use their song as our theme.